How long have you been in Brooklyn?
My whole life,
What? That's
my
so cool.
whole life. It's pretty cool. I I feel like I never think home is cool, but I feel like everyone feels like their home isn't cool if they've lived there forever, kind of thing. Like I'm just used to it. But
I
yeah.
mean, no, everybody except the people who live in New York. Sure. Hey, y'all, and welcome to the Books We Should Have Read podcast. My name is Ashley Ray, and I'm a writer and producer on a mission to get adults who typically aren't into reading through the exploration of Black literary classics. This pod is an extension to the BWSR Book Club, which is currently reading classics surrounding relationships and magic, and you can find our complete book list for this collection at booksweshouldhaveread.com. Tune in each episode as I discuss a classic from the reading list with a member of my tribe, from what we love to what we hate about it, but ultimately rave about why each one is a book we all must read. Today we'll be talking about our fourth read in this collection, Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, with my internet friend Cassity.
My name, my pronouns, I guess what I do. I don't know how people write intros. I'm so not like picky about, I guess, like what these things are. I mean, I feel like some things you already know about me, what I do. I write a blog from time to time. Um, I'm in grad school to be a social worker. I'm a yoga student. I don't know. So it's just I'm just here. Whatever feels good for you, as long as it's true.
Wait, when I hit you up and I said, have you read this? Do you want to talk to me? I was so excited when you hit me back with the picture, like it's been on my shelf. I've been waiting
It
to get to it.
I just have they're just all it's just so many books just
I
sitting here.
listen, that's how it
And
is, right?
my 11-year-old self would shun me. But my 11-year-old self also wasn't paying bills and in grad school and teaching and but
It's hard.
just trying to find the time to actually sit with it. But it felt really good, to actually have a reason to read leisurely. And I'm glad I actually finally got to it. There's so many of his books that I have on my shelf that I haven't gotten to. So it felt really good. And it's actually like smacking me in the ass of this habit of just take an hour. Like I have the time. Like even though the world would not want me to believe it, I actually do have an hour in the day to just read a book a bit. If I let myself. So
If I were to describe Giovanni's Room to someone who's never read it before, I would say it's a story about a young man's struggle with his sexuality. The book was published in 1956, but the story takes place in 1950s Paris, and is centered around a young man named David really trying to come to terms with himself. Some of the themes of the book include sexual shame, manipulation, self-sabotage, and what really evil and powerful people are allowed to do with their power. David, our main character, is an American expat. He was born and raised in New York, very rich, privileged lifestyle. His mother passed away when he was younger, so he was raised by his father, and his father enlisted the help of his aunt to come in and aid in the womanly household duties, while his father got drunk and dated a lot of women and lived a very bachelor-esque lifestyle. So early on, David's perception of women was more so like, oh, they're here to help us keep it all together. We also learn in the very beginning of the book that David had his very first sexual experience with a man when he was about 17 or 18 years old in the shadows of Brooklyn, which resulted in him having an extremely visceral reaction to the emotions that he was feeling. He then carried that sexual shame with him to Paris, where he has a girlfriend turned fiance named Hella, who is also an American, but is traveling throughout Europe being her gypsy self. And eventually a secret boyfriend named Giovanni, who is an Italian living in Paris. David and Giovanni meet through two older sugar daddy-esque gay men named Guillaume and Jacques, who are rich and flamboyant with said riches and their sexuality. Another very important character in this book is Giovanni's room, which is just a bedroom in some kind of boarding house in Paris where Giovanni and David's love affair really unfolds. For a book like this to be written during its time by a Black man centered around white men frolicking in Paris is extremely provocative and honestly very ballsy too. Throughout this book, Cassity and I struggle to really pinpoint where David's shame comes from. And I'm sure after listening to this conversation and even reading the book yourself, you'll be just as confused.
It took on shame in different ways. Like,
yeah.
Giovanni left his house, like when we finally learned about like his history and his life and like what he left behind back home. And then you have what felt, at least, like Jacques was not necessarily ashamed of his sexuality, but ashamed that like he couldn't share that with other people in his society, I guess, because of how, you know, how everybody thought about like gay bars and stuff and so on and whatnot. And then you have Guillaume, who like exploits people, even though, you know, he shares in that, in, you know, in his sexuality as well. So like that's his response, I guess, to I don't know. I wouldn't even know what to call it, but I just felt like it was all of these different aspects of shame happening all at once, where David's kind of felt more immediate and like bodies were dirty and sex was dirty, you know, and every that like proverbial sense of shame that we all know and love, versus like shame that like took on different forms of like Giovanni, who eventually fell into pieces, you know.
Couldn't take it. I mean, but we learned that he had like a lot of shit going on, you know, including like grappling with his sexuality and not being able to find true love, or feeling like he's never going to be able to find true love if it's not with a woman. And for me, it was just like, at first when I was reading it, I was just like, David, okay, so what? You like men and women. Like, it's fine. Like, but I live in 2020 and I'm in this body. Like,
which even now is still a thing.
Right.
You know, maybe not as much then in the country then, and that, which is interesting because it's Europe, where like now, so to speak, is where all kinds of freaky shit happens. But
exactly.
But anyway, but like you were saying, it's easy, you know, to embody queerness now. But I don't know. I think it takes on different forms, that coming out to self, coming out to others, being out around other people, what that looks like the weird dynamic between the four of them. I don't know. It was four of them, as in Jacques, Giovanni, and David.
Yeah.
We're all running the streets together.
Okay. I was very judgy of David because I, in the privilege that I have, looking the way I do, being more femme, like I don't really have to explain myself, you know?
Yeah.
And so like I was just like, okay, in my head, David is way more masked, and like he has this partner that he loves hella, like all he has to do is just tell. I just didn't understand.
But does he love hella?
Or is she a beard? I wrote beard when I was
think, yeah, absolutely. Entirely. I don't think he loves her. I think he loves again, before he met Giovanni, I think he loved Hella for what she could do for him, you know, how that looked. But I think I was actually more curious about David. Like, where did that shame come from? You know, especially in not wanting to talk to his father about what was going on, and in trying to understand more. Like, I ended up going back a couple of times to read, like, between Dad and his aunt. I think, like, where was the shame?
Right, because it wasn't like a definitive moment in his life where someone said gay is bad.
Right. You know,
at least that he told us.
Right. He had an interaction with Joey. There was some visceral response to that, you know, to his first sexual interaction with a man, a boy, I guess. And then let everything, then everything else happened. But I was more curious, like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
And granted, it doesn't excuse his behavior, towards other people, whether that was using Hella, I guess, trying Giovanni on, because that's also what it felt like. I don't think he loved him either.
He was totally trying Giovanni on.
Like,
Like,
trying it
for
on, like,
real.
fuck
And
it,
he
I'm
felt
already in here.
guilty about his
Yeah.
circumstance later. I don't think it was ever like Giovanni was his one true love.
No, not
I
at
think
all.
I think it was more so like, okay, maybe David's shame with his sexuality came from not seeing it. So like growing up, maybe he's only seen like men and women together. He's never seen men and men, or if he saw like same-sex couples, maybe it was only in the shadows.
Maybe. I'm trying to think about his response to women, because that's a lot of what he talks about. Like the way his aunt would talk about things, the picture of his mom in the living room and how her face, I guess, or the way that they would talk about her kind of control the room, versus like this. I feel like he just felt this immense sense of lack towards his father, or from his father, for stuff. And maybe I'm wondering how much that played into it being okay for him to use Hella as a beard, it being, it feeling okay to kind of use people in that way. And I say it like that because I'm still trying to figure it out. I haven't
I
figured it out yet.
listen, when I finished it a little bit ago, I was just like, I have to go back and read this again. Okay, but you brought up a good point, or it made me think about so his father's relationship with women was super disposable. Like even the
Yeah.
aunt was just like, I wonder if he knows about you and your women. And David was just like, well, I never thought about it until she actually said so.
Until now, right.
Exactly. And then like seeing how he had never really experienced life with his birth mom, but his aunt was like the one, his father used his aunt to take care of house and home.
Yeah.
Right? The women were the people who kind of like held it all together. And
And his father got to just, I'm sorry, and scream and be drunk and yell, or, whatever the case may
party.
be. I mean, eventually his dad got married though. So I wonder how much gallivanting was there, that, like, was it dramatized gallivanting from Ellen's part, or because I'm thinking again about time period, and just her thinking, as a man, you need a wife, you need a home, you need these things, because that's what makes a man a man. Even thinking about Hella towards the end, I want someone to let me be, a woman, and let me be a wife, and let me cook. Like,
I was so
there's so much happening. There's so much happening. I'm like, where the hell is the power in that? So
exactly. I was like,
I don't
Helen, I was
know.
rooting for you until now.
I didn't root for her then, because she knew, even before the end, where she was like, yeah, I always knew, before she caught him in the gay bar, I guess, like, went to go rescue him. It's like, okay, so you knew this about him, and you were willing to. So that just brings me back to like this idea that David has about the relationship between men and women, and kind of how people are allowed to treat other people, people are allowed to respond to other people, to respond to things. But that still doesn't answer my question about like where his shame came
Comes
from.
from.
Yeah.
But a lot of those ideals about like women were reinforced from the friends that he was with. Like hearing Giovanni talk about women so violently, and like who else talked about it? I think all of them talked about it.
Got
Jean
it at some
and
point. Yeah,
you.
when they were in the bar.
Yeah,
They were all in the bar. Yeah. Um, but I think it was a hatred for women. These were also men who used women to cover up something deeper within them, whether this was, again, Giovanni at home back in Italy, with, whatever the case may be. From what I read, he got this woman pregnant, they had a family, baby was born, stillborn, and then his life fell apart. And even that, I'm actually trying to understand more of, like, his story in that in between portion. And then you have David, who's using Hella as a beard, and then Jacques and Guillaume, who are, like, I guess, these richer, older, men, in Paris, and have these random relationships with women who own, run bars and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think I think they hate women, for being able to be so, whether that's feminine or open or, whatever the case may be. But it makes me think about, what about gay women?
Well, I mean,
Or, like, how do we know?
yeah,
Yeah.
but we heard what David thought about trans women.
I had to close the book for a second. It was
I was just like, how much is this is Dave? How much of this is David and not James Baldwin? It really like made me think.
But I mean, I think if anything, more of maybe what James Baldwin was hearing,
Mm-hmm.
especially being a Black man in Paris. I'm sure that wasn't easy, and I know he speaks a lot on that, like in interviews and stuff. But I don't know. There's this hatred almost for something that they want. He was making a home for David, Giovanni, making a home for David, doing all of this for you, almost embodying feminine, I guess,
Yeah.
qualities or whatever the case may be, while also hating on it at the same time, in a sense. I don't know. I don't know if they hated their bodies that they were trapped in with these feelings, or maybe like the inability to express.
I think it's the latter, especially when I go back to like David's like what do you call him, dialogue in his head about like the trans women in the bar. Like you're jealous of them. I was just like, oh, so this is what it is. You're jealous that they are free and they're not burdened the way you are.
And my thing is why?
Mm-hmm.
Like I couldn't get it out of my head. Like, you're so angry.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's just because being in school and, you're learning clinical stuff and you have to learn how to, sometimes have empathy for the person who does the shitty thing in order to help them and blah, blah, blah. But like, what happened to you? Like literally, like what happened
Yeah,
that
you
was
have such a
so
privileged existence. Like I don't see a struggle. I
at
don't see a
all,
struggle for you, David.
at all. Like, when were you not free that you felt the necessity to lock yourself away somewhere? I don't, I don't know. Not to take away from just the evilness of what Giovanni was saying. I think in general, what he had to say about Americans, I don't even know why David wanted to be with him in the first place. He didn't seem all that great.
Because he was cute.
Was he? They made
In the
it into a
book,
movie. I don't know if he would be that cute.
I saw this boyish looking man, youthful, beautiful, olive skin. Like in my head, Giovanni was fine as hell.
One is here destroying himself, and the other one is just doing all kinds of stuff, destroying himself in a whole other way that no one really knows about, quite yet, even themselves. Like they were both destroying each other. This one's trapped in a room, hasn't moved on, hasn't.
And want you to be trapped in the room with them.
Yeah.
Because that's what David's life would have been.
Essentially, but it was also like, you wanted to try it on. I think part of him wanted to be in that room, I think, at one point, until he realized what it was. Like, oh shit, like it's literally just this. Then I'm just sitting here reading through timeline and I'm like, so none of y'all got a better job? There's no work. They don't offer work in Paris. I'm confused, like, is this bar the only place to work? Is your sense of occupation limited because you are gay or identify as gay? Well, Giovanni does, at least. I mean, hey, I'm not arguing it. I'm still trying to figure it out. But like, it just seems like this, there's part of it that feels like, okay, there's shame and like this unfortunate thing that okay, well, I won't say everyone, but a lot of people carry that they shouldn't be carrying, or that they should free themselves from carrying.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also this sense of like self-sabotage, and like this sense of self-created doom for all of them. Like when Jacques was giving, was it David the speech about you basically getting the chance to be free? I'm 45 and I'm old and now I have to live in like gay bars and be in the dark and have sex in the dark and everything is bad and I have to find, like, was it really that bad for you? Like, if trans men are out here living their best lives, and doing what it is that feels good for them, were you not as free as you thought you were? Like, I'm just trying to figure out if it was more about them or more about the world that they were in, or was it both?
In this next section, Cassity and I explore the many dynamics of powerful white men with money, drawing connections between this book's own powerful white men, Giovanni, and David's sugar daddies, Guillaume and Jacques, and Euphoria's, yes, the show on HBO, powerful white man, Nate's dad, Cal, and their sickening exploitation of those around them who don't have as much privilege as they do. Also, extreme spoiler warning, guys. At the beginning of the book, we find out that Giovanni is being put to death, and it isn't until later on in the novel that we find out why. And if you don't want us to spoil it for you, I suggest you stop listening and grab yourself a copy of this novel right now. Are you still listening? Okay. A little context for those who want to keep on listening. Giovanni and David's love affair happens while Hella, David's girlfriend, is away from Paris and comes to a screeching halt as soon as she returns. David disappears for like 3 days or something crazy and doesn't speak to Giovanni or his gay sugar daddies, Guillaume and Jacques, until he runs into them at a bookstore while out with Hella. James Baldwin describes Giovanni as not looking very well, super shabby, and financial pressures on top of his sexual shame, being exploited by his boss Guillaume, and abandoned and then broken up with by his closeted lover David, ultimately pushes him over the edge and he snaps, murdering Guillaume atop the very bar where all of this shit began. I think the blood falls on all of their hands. David for playing house with Giovanni, knowing good and well that he was always just going to marry Hella in the end, but mainly Jacques and Guillaume for continuously using their power and status in the community to exploit and violate those just trying to survive and make ends meet. And if you've read this novel before, I'm dying to hear what you think.
Because when I finally found out why Giovanni was getting his head chopped off, like I thought someone had caught them in this room or something, and someone had found them out in this room living together. Come to find out, he just fucked around and killed his old boss or some shit just out of like sheer anger. It's like, okay,
His old sugar daddy.
like that was it, you know. So I'm just, I don't know.
In my head, he should have killed him a lot sooner. I don't know. It's just something so dirty about Guillaume and like Jacques that are just, it's very predatory. And it's just like, ew. Each time I'm just like, ew. They are dirty, dirty.
They are. Like, and I'm thinking about, again, Euphoria. I love that show.
I love it too.
I'm wondering, like, he reminds me of Nate's dad. Y'all reminds me of Nate's dad. You know, it's like all of these people who are fighting their own demons. It's just we all respond to that fight or react to that fight differently. And I don't think any of them responded any better than the other. You know, I think eventually all of the responses they had, whether that was to, you know, predate someone else, to exploit someone else, to use someone else, you know, to take money from someone else, to go to help for this one for money. Like, I don't know. It was just all of them had this like interdependency on the other for whether that, you know, validation or power, safety, whatever the case may be, all in that shape.
It's so gross though. And now that you brought up Nate's dad, I'm just like, oh my God, what's up with these rich white men who like, what are you afraid of? Oh, your Achilles heel is other people's approval of you.
In reality, you know, to think he was, again, when thinking about all the newspapers that came out and David, you know, just being so angry at like, no one knows the truth about him. You never said anything about his truth either. You was out there in that bar living your best life up until, you know, like something happened. Like, do you really care about the truth? Because if it matters to you as much as it does now, then why didn't it matter half as much then when everyone was alive and things were well and you were hiding from him? You didn't want to be seen by him, you know, like after everything that happened once he finally got together with Giovanni. Like I think it's just the power to. I'm a richer gay man. I'm a richer, protected, queer, richer, protected, queer gay man living in France, and I've got the money to hire and fire poor gay, queer, men that are looking for, I have the ability to. And I'm not sure if
Yeah.
that just comes from privilege and just having the power to facilitate movements, in the lives of others in that way. But I don't know, like you said, it's just gross. It is gross. There's nothing, you can't make it ungross. It's just I think I just want to know more about them.
Yeah.
Naturally. Like I want to know how you got here. Like I see what our end product is, and none of what happened to you before excuses anything you've done as of late. But
I'm trying to make sense of it in my head.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I just don't like how gosh, how you can have that much power over someone's life and still want more.
Even in that moment, in Giovanni's lowest moment, like came back to you for a job after being humiliated. Again, not that Giovanni was the greatest person with all the shit that he had to say, but you humiliate him on purpose in front of all of these people. You make a show out of it. Clearly, you have some power here, in this situation. This person is begging you, for their job, to keep their job so that they could live in their little box, and they decide to show their face again. I'm honestly not shocked that you were killed. Like I'm granted, and I'm sure a lot of that had a lot more to do with what happened with David and the conversation. But
I'm surprised it wasn't any more violent than it was.
yeah, because honestly, you wouldn't have been murdered if you didn't push him. But you pushed him. I don't think he pushed him. I think he pushed somebody who was already on like the emotional
Oh yeah.
brink of, edge. So
And in the beginning when David said the blood is on his hands too, I was like, hell yeah. By the end of the book, I was just like, oh, absolutely.
But is it?
Whoa, 100. I totally think so.
I don't know. Not 100% of not 100% of the blood. And I say that because I say the same thing for Hella. Like you knew.
Mm.
It wasn't like Giovanni didn't know about Hella or didn't know that like he wasn't, that there wasn't this mistress or your woman, or your love, like coming back from Spain. It wasn't, especially when he's giving David the speech about I made this a home for you, and I did this for you and blah, blah, blah. And I knew that, like you were keeping things from me and you weren't sharing. Again, you knew this about him. I think that's the one thing that Giovanni and Hella actually have in common. Like you both know this person is terrible or living another lie or keeping a secret, or omitting or hiding, whatever the case may be. And yet you still choose to be in space and share and do in hopes that this person who still hasn't settled within himself will settle with you.
Mm.
I don't know.
So you're saying because you weren't forthright, you contributed to this lie that he was living.
Not 100%, because I think that, again, that takes away accountability, and responsibility. And that's not to do that either on David's part, because you're also an adult who has the ability to figure your shit out. Like, why are you even in Paris anyway? Like, why? Like, what's there for you? Like, how'd you even end up there as an American? I digress. But just, I don't think that there's any one person in this story who's entirely responsible. I don't think David hid his series of problems. I don't think David hid his troubles entirely. I don't think he talked about them, as openly and widely as he probably should have, transparently. But I don't ever think he was 100% at fault.
Oh, well, no. Let me back up. I don't think.
No, I know. I'm just saying in
Yeah.
general. Yeah, you're good. You're good. I'm just in terms of like the blood being on his. It is, but I think he more so feels that way out of his own sense of guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And having been that person that like, damn, maybe if I didn't break up with him or tell him I want to move back to America or whatever the case may be, he might not have walked in and killed that man in the first place. But if it wasn't going to be Guillaume, it'd be somebody else, because eventually you would have left.
Yeah, and it low-key could have been you. I was just thinking like the way he broke up with him.
I don't think he meant to.
You
Truthfully.
think that he meant to have Giovanni and Hella?
No, I just don't think he meant to break up with him in that moment.
Mm.
Like I think I think it's like when someone is talking and then they put their foot in their mouth. And it's like, well, fuck. I can't take this shit back now. And Giovanni being as dramatic and full of all of the words, I feel like he walked in. I think he walked in and he already knew, like, all right, some shit is up. Like, all right, like I'm bracing myself for some bullshit.
Yeah, but wait, we got to back up further because he left. He just left for 3 days, didn't tell him where he was going. That's where I'm at. Like, you just left. You didn't tell me. And I knew about Hella and I knew she was coming back. Why didn't you tell me she came back and I'm going to go see her?
Yeah, but this is also a person that doesn't tell you shit. You live in a room with this person all day, every day, and they still somehow manage to tell you nothing. Again, it's not to take away from David's responsibility of having to communicate, like, yeah, I'm going to go see my mistress that you do know about for 3 days. I'll be back. But I think it was more of like, you left, didn't tell me about your mistress, and then I lost my job because I was fired, and now you're telling me you want to leave me for this mistress, like, that you don't really fuck with because I know you're gay because you've been here with me like this whole or bi, just either way, not out, about your sexuality in general. I don't know. Giovanni says it. I never reached you. Like, you knew this about him. I have never reached you, said Giovanni. You have never really been here. I do not think you have. I do not think you have ever lied to me, but I know that you have never told me the truth. Why? Like, you knew the whole time, man. Just like you knew the whole time. So I think you're asking him why. Why aren't you asking yourself why?
Like, why
Why?
didn't you say something sooner? Like, if you knew he
Forget it.
wasn't truthful with you.
Forget say something. Why didn't you go find yourself another option?
That too. Like, why put all your eggs in this basket?
Like,
That's
what was it
what
about him? If you knew
yes.
this thing about him,
Yes.
why try to, like, with the whole bricks and building a thing in the wall? I don't know. What were they building? A
Like a
fireplace or
bookshelf,
something
something
in
for
the
your
wall.
bedroom.
Building something in the wall. Like, why?
What did David ever tell you that made you think he was forever?
They were, that he came to the room. David didn't have shit. He was tired of going to Jacques for shit. So now he came to you for some
He was
shit.
fine.
Like,
You knew he couldn't pay his hotel bill. You're his sugar daddy now. He's squatting with you.
he has two sugar daddies. So anything, Jacques was also David's sugar daddy. Or I won't even say sugar daddy. It's again with this power thing. Like, knowing that Jacques was, like, in love with him, I guess, practically. And then dangling this, well, I'm straight carrot, in front of his face,
Mm-hmm.
knowing full well that you're not, at least straight. I don't know about, how else he might sexually identify, but it's this power thing. And I don't know if it's a, dare I say, man thing. I hate society, but, like, that's where David's power was. Like, this man's going to give you money because he's in love with you. Okay, cool. Guillaume obviously using all of the power he had in the world to abuse everyone and his,
Ooh.
and his power to do that. And then you have Giovanni trying to guilt, David into staying for all of this stuff and don't leave me. I lost my job. Like, there's just all of this manipulation of power happening. I don't know. It's like I feel bad for all of them and none of them at the same time.
Yeah, same, right?
Like,
Like,
I feel bad for all of you and none of you at the same time.
geez, because y'all are all using someone for
All
something.
of them.
For something. At first, I was just like, oh my God, I feel like, even though I know that Jacques and Guillaume are dirty men, I was just like, oh my God, I feel bad for them that they have to live this way.
But my question was, do they have to? Particularly
Exactly.
Guillaume. If
Yes.
they're a man, especially, like, you have family money. Like, it's not even you have money, you have family money.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to live this way.
Mm-mm.
So, like, you're enjoying this.
Mm-hmm. Why isn't David black?
Could James Baldwin have written this story in America? I don't know. Like, there are tons of questions, Like, there are tons of questions that, like, I don't have answers to, and it's so aggravating. Like, I think that was it took me a minute. I think I read the first 2 chapters and I had to go back and I'm like, wait, so is David black or is David white? Because he doesn't say it.
Mm-mm.
He
He
doesn't
talked about his
necessarily say it.
reflection or his how does he talk about it
Yeah.
very like flippantly.
Yeah. And then I'm like,
Um
okay, so sandy blonde hair. I'm like, okay, okay.
mhm. Mhm.
I'm like, all right. I'm trying to get a feel for this.
Right. Black people can have blonde hair too.
Right. So I don't know. I don't know. I mean, maybe he wasn't maybe David isn't black because he wants the story to be as far removed from him as possible.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know.
Maybe this story would be easier to swallow. Maybe he felt like the story would be easier to swallow with David being a white man. But if David were a black man, I don't know. I've heard James Baldwin talk about the plight of being a black gay man in America. Um, but nothing that I can give you off the top of my head
Yeah, yeah.
that would.
Hmm.
But I mean, from what I remember, of course, it was like a hard thing and very complex, like him being black, gay, and then politically involved during that time too. Was a really like trying thing. And so like maybe David being a white man, like this gay ass story being about white people is just easier for you to take in. Because if it's a gay because if it's a gay black man with other gay black men, then it's like Hotep's here, you're
Yeah,
my
yeah.
family.
But I'm also wondering, like, kind of like everything that's been happening, like with Lizzo and people trying to, her being a fat black woman means that she has to, be politically involved when it comes to like speaking about her health and blah 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 and this and that. Why, even if the story was about a black man, why couldn't he just be a black gay man?
Why
Why can't it be as simple as
as
this? And
this, right?
I think that's the question I'm asking in terms of like,
Mm.
does it have to be as complicated? I understand why it's more complicated, you know, not to negate the experiences that we've had in general as a people across the diaspora, the different, experiences that we've all had, which influences the reason why a lot of us write the way we write, express the way we express, But did it have to be as complicated? If David were a black man, did he have to have political conversations? Why couldn't he just write about David being black and having, you know what I'm saying? Like, either way, it's still a book. It's
Like
still fiction.
letting us know that David was black, but not having that be another character in the story. Because what
Right.
it's really about is grappling with your sexuality, right?
Right.
And
And
why
so
can't
why,
that just be the thing?
right. Why does it have to be
Race and.
right? Why someone should read Giovanni's Room? I think first, before getting into like the more intimate topics of the book, I think on the surface it is about a person who does really shitty things. And so like trying to understand, our relationship to people who do shitty things. And how we either make space for that, we don't make space for it, what kind of space we make for them and the shitty things that they do, um, on like surface level, but then I think if you're the queer person who's reading this or the queer person who has like super religious family, maybe, if you're, just any kind of identity that essentially is ostracized and like where there's some dark thing, unfortunately, like some dark thing happening because of how society responds to, who you are authentically as a person, and in this case, queer. Um, Understanding how other characters or how other people or authors in this case navigate some of those darker parts of life, um, for other people. But I think, and then another thing, is also seeing a vantage point, in that queerness, and how all these people are sharing the same life but are also living a different life all at the same time, even though they're all in the same world, essentially. It talks about so many different parts of people that often we don't really get the chance to, I think, see more of. I think over time, granted, this is definitely straying from the answer to this question, but over time, like, we've created buzzwords, for topics: self-care, self-love, uh, even mental health, and in and of itself. Hell, I'm even pressed, to say that queer has become a buzzword, in a way, even though it's kind of easier to define, than any of these other words that feel kind of not arbitrary, but ambiguous.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking about shame, being able to see shame in all of those different spaces, shame from somebody who might be more well acclimated in society. Um, I don't know. So being able to explore something that I think we see one way in a bunch of different ways. Um, but that's me. I think that's why people should read it. I hope that was a full answer.
Thank you, Cassity, for doing this pod episode with me. I appreciate you so much. You can follow Cassity at cassity.v. That's CASSITY.V on Instagram. Follow Books We Should Have Read on Instagram at Books We Should Have Read and Twitter at BooksWSR to stay up to date with BWSR happenings. And if you're interested in being a part of the official book club discussion, be sure to join our private Facebook page, which is linked on our website and social media accounts. Sign up for our newsletter to get exclusive BWSR info, get hip to new and up-and-coming Black authors, and enter our monthly raffle for a $50 gift certificate to a Black-owned bookstore. Our next book and final read in this collection is Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler, and that episode featuring my friend, mentor in film, and award-winning filmmaker, Zachary Cunningham, releases March 16th. This podcast was produced and edited by me, Ashley Ray, and the dope-ass track you hear in the background was produced by Ty.2wo. That's ty.2, the letters W-O, on Instagram. If you liked what you heard and want to support this Black woman-owned and operated movement financially, there is an Anchor link in the show notes where you can do just that. Any and everything is welcomed and appreciated. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time. Bye, y'all.